Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Good morning, Mrs. Busby. Are you with us this morning?
I hope
Wonderful.
so. I haven't checked yet.
For a minute, I thought I was going to have to do this thing alone this morning. You said.
I don't know yet whether you're alone or not.
Well, as always, we try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And I thought, Judith K., you know, all this business with the police and nationwide, defund them, etc., etc. Well, it might be nice if we'd sit up here in Logan County and tell everybody within listening distance how lucky we are to have the police forces that we have here in the Sheriff's Department and Paul Adams City Police. We're lucky here, folks, here in Mayberry. We don't have Andy Griffith or Don Knotts, but we've got we've got some doggone good administrators here, and our sheriff and our chief of police. And so let's just give a word of thanks. You know, nobody ever thinks about the things that can go wrong, even right here in Lincoln, Logan County. So any day they put that uniform on, and unfortunately putting the uniform on also usually incurs putting on a protective vest. That's kind of too bad.
Have you seen that PSA on television about somebody calls 911 and the call is answered and they say, if this is in regard to a home invasion, please call on Tuesday. If this is in regard to a car robbery, please call 2 weeks from Thursday.
Make an appointment.
And then they go on to say about the folly of defunding police departments.
Well, it is a folly.
Scary.
No question about that. It's just ridiculous. And some of these politicians, you know, what was it Will Rogers said about the politicians? He said they couldn't tell much difference between them. I forgot now, but it had some derogatory remark about the politicians. For the most part, old Will was right on about anything he said. Let's get down to serious business. We have a nice young man as our guest this morning, and we appreciate he's taking his valuable time. So go right ahead and introduce this young man, Mrs. Busby.
Yes. Last week, you'll recall, we had Richard Summerall with us, and he served as our faithful, blessed librarian for many, many years at the Lincoln Public Library. And Richard has taken retirement and has been replaced by Mike Starasta. And Mike has been with the Lincoln College Library, but now he's moved on to the Lincoln Public Library, and I'm sure you have all kinds of new things that you'd like to introduce for us. And we're glad to have you with us today, Mike.
Well, thank you
for coming.
Well, yes, you're now laboring in the halls of my early learning, Mr. Starasta.
Really?
I used to spend a lot of time in the library there. My mother was delighted because she knew where I was. And as a young boy, I go to the library and spend a lot of time there. So it has a special meaning to some of us older people. Go right ahead, Mike.
Well,
tell us.
It's fine. I hear that from a lot of people, and that's one of the important purposes of a public library is to help provide an education. For many young people will say that that's where they first, could say, became educated.
Yes.
Well, that was our early computers.
Yeah.
You know, that was our early Google.
Very true. The old card catalog. We don't use it anymore, but that was the earliest form of Google in a lot of ways.
I don't think I could do it today, but I did know how to work the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, yes.
That was not named for Tom Dewey, by the way.
No, I remember the Dewey Decimal System from my days when they were trying to educate me.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, we're happy to have you with us. We're happy to have you on the library helm. Have had some new challenges, besides, of course, worrying about this COVID thing. And I know now that the library is temporarily closed. That's unfortunate. But, folks, those things are necessary. So tell us about that, and as they say in showbiz, take it from the top, Mike.
Well, we had been open to the public for a while. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, for right now, we're going to have the buildings closed to the public at least until next Friday. And then we'll just have to see what happens. But one thing I would emphasize is that we're still providing curbside delivery, where individuals can call into the library and basically tell us what they want, what they're looking for. We will help them to find the material, and then we'll arrange a time between 11 and 1 where they can drive up to the library, and we'll come out to their car wearing masks and possibly gloves and hand them their materials.
Now, for returning a book, though, you can still drop it in that drop box that's
Yes, they can
on the
still-
alley. Or
I'm always a
whatever
little bit hesitant to use that drop box. I don't want the book to go in there wrong and break the spine or something. You know,
That's not a
always
problem.
I've always taken them back in.
But the books are quarantined for 3 days after they're returned. It's suggested that we quarantine them for 72 hours. And so we take that as a preventive measure. And in addition,
How do you lock the door on them?
well, we put them in a side room, and we have them stacked according to the date when they were returned. And then in 3 days, it can be put back on the shelves, and we're taking precautions ourselves. Staff members are wearing masks. We're frequently washing, using hand sanitizer, etc. Well, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's a situation that we're all in.
Exactly. That's
whole
something
world.
we have to work
Yes.
with it now.
It isn't peculiar to
Mr.
Illinois.
Starasta, I'd like to say a word about your board. You have an excellent board, you have dedicated. Those folks are all well-intentioned and dedicated.
Yes, they
And
are.
I figure if somebody's taking the time to serve on a library board, they got to have their grassroots planted pretty deep.
Very much so. We have a good board that's dedicated to looking out for the library and for representing its interests in the community. Of course, this is all done free of charge. Nobody's
Yes.
paid to be on the board.
Okay, do you want to give us just a little thumbnail sketch? Since the only thing that we contribute out of our wallet as we see you is a fine if we return a book late. And that pennies that we give you isn't going to make any difference one way or another to anybody. So, from whence cometh the funds?
Well, from property taxes, basically. It's part of a levy that is issued. The money comes from property taxes. We actually don't fine anymore. We have done away with fines.
I never found a reason, a decent reason, to complain about my taxes when they support places like our library and our education system.
Well,
Yes.
and it's an excellent deal if you take a look at what you get, because in addition to the books we have in our library, we can use interlibrary loan to get books from all over the state of Illinois, and we can even get them from outside the state of Illinois if need be. So your card doesn't just pay for the books that are in the library, it allows you to have access to literally millions of items.
Now, is it just books that you're entitled to subscribe to from outside Lincoln, or is it everything?
Well, books largely, but we also have a subscription to, you could say, ebooks that can provide
Okay.
thousands and thousands of books that you can literally check out to your phone.
Okay.
And you download it to your phone for a certain period of time, and then when it has a due date, just like a regular book, and then it just expires off your phone when the due date comes.
And you can renew it if need be,
Yes.
I assume.
Oh, wait a
Yes.
minute. I have a point of interest here. If I download a book
Yes.
on my telephone,
Yeah.
it's just like if I took it home and I have X number of days before I bring it back.
Right.
And if it's on my phone, that is going to disappear into the thin air at the end of the expiration date. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah. So slow readers don't take advantage of that.
And of course, we also have DVDs you can check out. We have magazines, have a lot of programming for children that they can participate in. Of course, we've had to scale that back this summer because of COVID, but
Yes.
yet we're still having our summer reading program. It's just being done in a different way.
But that's such a good idea. I'm glad that you're able to find a way to continue it. In what way are you handling that?
Well, we have an online program called Read Squared where anyone can log in and basically participate in online activities. They can log the number of hours they've spent reading books, and children can use that just like they would with a reading log if they were coming in, which they can also pick up a paper reading log as well. And then they're eligible to receive prizes and such for reading the materials. And actually, this is going to be available throughout the year, this Read Squared, and we're also having discovery kits children can come in and pick up each week, and it has an activity in it, such as a craft that they can do.
Great. That's wonderful.
Mr. Starasta, I wanted to ask a question about the local, in the area newspapers. In the past, you'd have the News Gazette, and the Chicago Tribune, and the Panagraph, and the State Journal Register, etc. Special spot there on the north side of your little reading room. Is that service still available?
Oh yes, and it's very popular. Interestingly enough, we have quite a few readers who ask for the Wall Street Journal.
Interesting.
Which we get.
Well, they're too cheap to pay for it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, but that you do have a readership of the Wall Street Journal. That's interesting. Do they sit there with their little pencils and figure things out?
I'd like to get back to what you have for children, and in the fall now, as school begins. I'm not sure yet what the plans are for the various districts in our area. Springfield's made some decisions, and so has Bloomington. But as parents and grandparents, families, we're going to be more responsible, possibly, for our children's education. Now, in what ways are you going to be able to supplement that at the library?
Well, through programming, for example. One thing we're doing is, during COVID, we can't have the in-person programming for children that we used to have, so instead we're doing programs online through Facebook, where they can, for instance, having story time on Facebook, so parents can log their children into that, and they can, in effect, follow along with the story being read, and also through Instagram.
I'm not sure I'd want my kid to read some of that stuff that's out there on Facebook.
So,
well, there's that.
There's that to be said.
And we're going to continue to have this kind of online programming into the fall. And we'll also continue to have the discovery kits available throughout the
I've
fall.
just discovered something here, Mrs. Starasta.
Yes.
I've discovered that if we don't take a couple of seconds and acknowledge our sponsors, they're going to shut our button off. Go right ahead. And right back live in the studios here, WLCN, high on the tops of County Road 2250. The program, of course, is, what is the name of this program, Mrs. Busby? Program is Viewpoint. We're very happy to have as our guest with us this morning, Mr. Mike Starasta. He's the new director, replacing a long-serving Richard Sumrall, who has now gone into retirement. I don't know what he's doing in his retirement. I forgot to ask him that last week.
I'm sure he has plenty to do.
Yeah. Anyway, Mike comes with us with library experience, and I think the board of the library did a good job in hiring him. He's telling us a little about his new duties. And, of course, he didn't realize when he signed on that we were going to have to fight this COVID thing, which is a very serious matter for all the entire world, not just those of us here in Logan County. What has been your biggest challenge, Mike, as you took reins from Mr. Sumrall, aside from fighting this governmental thing with COVID?
Well, I just think that has been the primary, I guess, challenge, has been dealing with the COVID. Aside from that, I don't know, just learning how the whole system works. I mean, I've been a library director before, but this is the biggest one I've been in.
Yeah.
And so...
And by the way, the nicest.
Yeah.
Physically.
Yes, I would agree.
You are the recipient of somebody's large yes years ago when that library building was built. I remember as a kid going in there, I think I went slack-jawed at the beauty of it. As a kid, I couldn't even spell beauty in those days. But I remember being awed by that impressive ceiling,
Well, I love these old Carnegie buildings.
Yeah.
Oh my.
They just have character to them. They have a character you don't see in modern buildings.
Well, I've said over and over again at the voice of being, stupid about it. We are lucky to have that architectural gem here,
Oh, yes.
a block off the square,
And lucky further that back through the years, the library boards have been so responsible and have taken care of that building so that it's still in pretty darn good shape because it's not brand new anymore.
No, it isn't. It dates back to 1902. So
See,
it's been around for
It's older than I am.
118 years.
No, really, hats off to the boards over the years. That's the thing with these buildings. If they aren't taken care of, they just don't last.
as I said in my time, that was a computer for all of us. If we had a school project, or if we just wanted to do something on our personal interest, go and do research, you could do that at our Lincoln Library. And we still have people come in here. Now you have computers available for the public to use, which I think is a very nice thing for a lot of people can't have computers in their homes, and that's too bad. I'm sorry about that. But they can avail themselves of the computer's uses by coming in and using those that are available at the library. Tell us about that program, Mr. Starasta.
Well, yes, we have a number of computers. Right now, when we have been open to the public, we have placed some limitations on them so people have spacing due to the coronavirus.
Physical spacing.
Physical spacing, yes. But the computers are definitely something that get used a lot because there are people out there who do not have a computer, or if they have one, they may not have good internet access, which is something that we provide. We have a lot of people who will come in to do job searches on the computer or to fill out forms.
That's interesting.
When applying for a job, because anymore there are a number of employers that's what they want you to do. Mm-hmm. Rather than sending in the traditional resume, they have an online form that they want you to just come in and fill out on a computer and click the submit button.
Sure.
And so that's a service we provide to a lot of people.
That's a very important service, particularly into today's times. I don't know what the unemployment factor is here in the county. It's certainly not what it is in the rest of the state. I have no idea. But notwithstanding that, somebody's looking for a job, and that's a real asset to them to be able to come in and avail themselves of that service.
Well, and it's almost expected that you're going to have some computer skills for a job, so people can come in and learn some of those skills by using the computers as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you offer some classes to people in basic computer literacy?
We have not, but that's something to consider.
Why don't you give us a little thumbnail sketch of some of your hopes and dreams for the Lincoln Public Library?
Well, one thing we're looking at doing is, if you will remember, Heartland Community College had classrooms on the other side of the annex building.
Yeah.
That used to be the old Woolworth
yes.
store.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we actually own those rooms. And so down the road, one thing we're looking at doing is actually expanding out the annex into that area and providing additional space there. And we're looking at a number of possibilities of what that could be used for, perhaps study areas for students, or even a technology corner where people could come in and use different computer programs and such to learn skills.
May I digress just a minute about the annex? A lot of people don't realize that our Lincoln Public Library has, quote, an annex across the alley. Those folks, those parents with youngsters, little rugrats, what I describe them, that's a wonderful asset for them. I have been in there, as I discussed last week with Mr. Summerall, observed adults teaching youngsters or having a little program for youngsters, and that's a great thing.
Yes, we have a new children's librarian as well who started about the same time I did. And that is, her name is Donna Cunningham. And prior to coming to the Lincoln Public Library to be what they call youth services librarian, she was she had worked at the Elkhart Public Library and then was the director at the Athens Public Library.
Well, she's got some experience.
She gave us some skills then.
Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm. And we also have a new resident in the children's section, and that is a bearded dragon. It's a lizard from Australia.
Oh.
And interesting enough, we came into him because Dennis Campbell found him out at the Creekside Environmental Center. Apparently somebody had dumped him out there.
Oh, dear.
And there was no
Seriously?
way he'd survive through an Illinois winter, so I agreed to take him in, and now he's residing in the children's area.
Oh, I bet they think he's great.
Yes.
What is his length or dimensions or
About
whatever?
16 inches long,
Uh-huh.
including from head to tip of tail.
So does he live in a cage or an aquarium?
Well,
or-
it's like a glass sort of aquarium, but it's a tank that's designed for lizards.
Is that right?
Yes.
And does he have a name?
We haven't named him yet. When
You'll have
things
to.
finally open up, we're going to have a naming contest for the children.
Good deal.
To
Yes.
name him.
Yeah, so let's go a little bit further with our extension across the alley there. Tell us what encompasses. I know movies, DVDs, periodicals.
Periodicals are now in the Carnegie Building.
They're in the Carnegie
In
Building.
the annex, we have, well, of course, the DVDs. We also have adult fiction there. We have young adult books, which young adult is basically what they call items aimed for teenagers. And then we also have the children's section with books for children, and we have a lot of our children's programs there in the annex and children's activities.
Yeah. But where do we get these people, these adults who come in? That one particular program that I witnessed, this young gentleman was doing whatever it was in the story, but in the process of his talking with the children, he kept incorporating the little things that a kid ought to be knowing about, the civilities of life, and yes, please, and no thank you, and those very little substantive things that are so basic to a child growing up. Where do we get our talent to come and do those things?
Well, some of that comes from our staff, which is very talented as a whole. In summer reading, sometimes we've had programs where we have paid somebody to come in and present a program like that.
Do you have periodicals that are for librarians that give you some suggestions as to somebody having seen a children's or an adult's program that they thought was particularly meaningful, and this was who presented it, so that you can kind of check those kinds of things out too?
Well, yes, we have subscriptions to journals such as the Library Journal, which we share among ourselves and the staff. Administrators share it with each other and with staff. And some of us, like myself, I subscribe through the internet to a listserv for library directors who are all part of the Illinois Heartland Library System, which is what we're part of, which is basically goes from the border of Logan County down to Cairo, Illinois.
Okay.
So the southern half of the state.
Right.
648-5510. Once again, we're going to fool around and get through this program and not have to use those numbers. Anybody might have a question for Mr. Mike Starasta, our Lincoln Public Library Director, and or comments. Be nice to him because he's a nice young man. 648-5510. Call in with any comments, questions, or suggestions. Mike, the budget. Everybody has to operate with a budget. How do you determine the book prices today? They've just gone astronomical, of course. And who determines what's a bestseller? I certainly don't believe in the New York Times description of a bestseller. I don't believe in the New York Times, period. But that's another story. That's a political comment. How do you sit down and arrange to determine what you're going to buy in books for the ensuing year?
Well, there's a variety of methods, and yeah, we do look at the New York Times bestsellers list, among many others. We don't just look at one list. I would also just take a look at what gets checked out at the library. Sometimes you get a feel for the community, for what kind of books are popular in your community, and what's popular in one community may not be as popular in another community. But you also try to provide a variety of resources, so you don't just purchase, say, books that are all of one type.
Now, are you flooded with information from publishers trying to hawk their books to libraries?
Oh, yes, definitely. We are. And one thing I try to look at, too, is look at, say, new authors who are coming up, and we'll get, for instance, the Library Journal will contain articles about them, descriptions of some of their books, and you see things that you'll find yourself thinking, okay, here's someone that's brand new, hardly anybody's heard of this author, but it sounds like this is something people would like. So, yes, we'll purchase some of those, too, just to try to introduce our readers to new authors from a different genre.
Now, newspaper publishers are not very altruistic in that word. Do you get a break on on your subscriptions for the local news area papers around here?
Well, of course, it would depend on the, news publisher, but as a whole, yes, we typically do.
I would think so, That's another, by the way, that's another kind of a quiet service that you offer the patrons of the library. An opportunity to go in there and slip into a nice, comfortable chair, spread your paper out on a table, and enjoy the Champagne's News Gazette or whatever paper it is. That's nice to have those on a daily basis. And you have people who come in there on a daily basis.
Oh, yes. We have people that come in every day to read a newspaper.
With your staff having come from different libraries, that must be a help to all of you, because you can each bring your experiences from where you were previously and share with each other.
Well, that's very true, because people will bring in different ideas, and as the library director, one thing I always try to do is listen to different ideas from my staff, because sometimes I'll admit they may have a perspective that I don't have, and I think it's important that I listen to that.
If we'd all learn to listen, the world would be a better place, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
You think you'd get that message out to the swamp?
Yeah.
There's not much listening going on out there, unfortunately. Your library now under COVID restrictions, how's that working? If I had a book that I wanted to get, could I call up and give your person on the phone the name of that book, and they'll get it for me, and then call me and tell me they have it, and I go where to pick it up?
Yeah, the way the curbside delivery service works is, again, you would call in, we'd talk to you, fill out a form, and then when we find the material, we will call you back and arrange a time for you to pick up. You just come in the back alley between the two buildings.
Which is dangerous, by the way. That alley's something else.
Well, you do have to watch yourself. It's the time to pick up, and then one of us will come out and hand you your item in a bag.
And one best be aware of the time, because there could be somebody that's scheduled to be 5 minutes behind you, and if you are late, you
could be
screwed up the whole line.
Yes.
Well, there again, that's common courtesy steps into the picture there. If you tell you we're going to be there,
some of us forget that, don't you know?
How about the lifespan of a book? Let's say you got a new book 10 years ago. When do you expect that book will be kaput physically?
Well, again, it just depends whether it's hardcover or softcover, and how many times it's gotten checked out, and
what it's about.
Yes, and whether somebody's dog has decided to use it as a chew toy, which unfortunately does happen every now and then.
Sure.
So there's a lot of factors there that can.
Is your facility that you've made available for your patrons, where you return the books there in that drop box, is that well used?
Oh, yes. Yes. Throughout the day, it gets used.
I always worried about you, as I said earlier. I was afraid I'd drop it in there and it would fall on the spine and break the spine something.
Well, I always put a couple rubber bands on it.
Well, that's because you're thoughtful.
No, but if you put a couple rubber bands around the book before you drop it in there, it's not as apt to get mushed.
Right, but I said it's also, we got rubber padding in the bottom of the drop box, so it isn't falling just on a hard surface.
Well, it's a nice service for people, particularly older people. I'm somewhat aware of them these days.
One thing I would point out right now is because of Corona, we cannot take donations. People have asked about that.
You cannot take donations?
We cannot take donated books right at this time.
Oh, because they might be germy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of too bad. Yeah.
I know. And our usual book sale, which we've had in August, we've postponed.
Yes.
And, of course, it all depends on how things are going at the time, but we're looking at having it in October
Okay.
instead.
Well, hopefully, somebody will have come up with something to crack this darn coronavirus before October.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
It used to be a magnificent bookstore in Chicago on South Wabash there. You're too young to remember it now. We called Crocs and Brentano's, and it was the go-to place for any kind of book. Mm-hmm. And I used when those days I was going to Chicago more often, and I'd always spend a couple hours there at Crocs, and got to know the owner quite well, and we'd go up and sit and have a cigar and a cup of coffee with him in his office.
Bill, if you could learn to overcome your shyness, you could meet people. Don't you think?
Well, by the way, Mr. Croc, we used to have a nightclub called the Chez Paris, and it was spelled C-H-E-Z.
Sure.
Anyway, Chez Paris. And his wife, they had the Chez Paris Adorables, which was the dancing troupe of young laddies. And Carl married a Chez Paris Adorable.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a little history that you don't need to know about.
But people like those little tidbits, don't they, Jim?
Well, they don't sell too well on WLCN, I don't think. Have you had anything coming up that you want to tell us about, Mike? Any secrets that you want to let us in on at this point in time?
Well, as I mentioned, we're looking at eventually expanding out the annex, and we're also looking at things such as online streaming services. We could add to our website for, say, music sort of thing.
Tell us about that now. Let's say somebody enjoys a particular classical piece of music.
It would be an online service that the library would subscribe to that you could access through the website. Possibly. That's one thing we're looking at doing. Of course, so much of the planning right now is just depending on what's going on, again, with the coronavirus. That's just setting the tone for a lot of things. One thing I would like to see, too, is more adult programming for adult patrons.
In what direction, please?
Well, one thing that's always interested me has been local history.
Oh, yes.
And so that's one thing I would like to have, maybe some adult programs regarding local and state history.
Oh, I can't help but think lots of people would like that.
Well, the thing is, I hear people say that, Illinois is boring. I actually think if you take a look at the history of this state, in central Illinois and just the state as a whole, there's a lot of interesting history in Illinois.
There's a judge, help me.
Judge L.P. Stringer.
Yes, who wrote...
Lawrence B. Stringer.
Lawrence B. Stringer, who wrote an Illinois history book that's very interesting. And, I can't help but think people would really like to hear more about that, because this county was in the midst of lots of things through the years.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of interesting history, I could say, here and just throughout central Illinois as a whole.
Oh, yes. That would be a good thing. Any other ideas?
Well, that's about what I have for now.
Well, you've only been there 20 minutes, so I'm sure other things will occur to you.
Your annex, how do you plan to expand, to make use of... I didn't know that you owned those buildings, the rooms where the college was, the Heartland College. And so you plan to make use of those rooms that they're now available to you?
Yes, we can actually... cut a hole in you could say a doorway in the back of the annex where it connects into. That would be the plan. And so you'd be able to just walk right into those through the annex.
Oh, my.
And how would you make use of that available space insofar as display is concerned?
Well, as I said, we're looking at a number of possibilities. One possibility would be to just have more rooms for books. Another possibility would be to use it for some sort of storage. But we're also looking at things like maybe having a maker space room, as they call it, for children and teens, where they could use different technologies, computers, and maybe something like a 3D printer to create things.
And those ideas that are on the board are discussed with your board as you develop your plans?
Oh, yes. Yes, and another idea is maybe even have a space for business people to come and meet.
That's a good
always
idea.
Library.
You
Have
talk
little-
about having these programs for teens and kids to introduce them to even more technology.
Right.
And that's the outfit to work with, of course. But how do you support that financially? Because I can't help but think that would be pricey. Would you charge the kids a fee to come, or what?
No, we probably wouldn't. And you can actually, surprisingly, you can do a lot for an inexpensive price as far as programs go to help introduce these young people to various technologies and such. You just have to do some of the research on your own and present it.
How many do you have on your staff now, Mike, that aid and abet and support you in your duties as director?
Well, we have, let me see here, I'm trying to think, about 15.
That's amazing. That's a lot of people.
We have myself, and then there's 2 assistant directors. And it's Caroline Keast, who's over in the...
She's been with our library system a long time.
And April Jensen.
Yes,
and
she
then
too.
Donna Cunningham is technically head of youth services, but she is one of the other administrators.
I want to pay a tribute to your kudo, if I may, to your associates there at the library. Always very pleasant. Always very pleasant, very helpful. I don't go in there a lot, but when I do, I'm always happy I did because I was well treated.
That's true.
Yeah, it's one thing we're very proud of, is that we do everything we can to help our patrons to feel that they are respected when they come in, and to provide as much help as we can to provide a welcoming atmosphere where they feel comfortable in the library.
We mentioned taxation early on this morning. Are our county library taxes, do those help places like our nice little library over my shoulder here at Atlanta and at Emden at the Whistle Stop and Elkhart, Mount Pulaski?
Yes, yes, it would
That's
help
good.
all of them.
That's good. That's great. Yeah. So some of our tax money stays right here in our county in our respective areas.
Yes, it does.
Well, people like to hear that. That's important.
And
So-
I always try to make sure in planning a budget that I'm, making the best use of the taxpayers' money that I can.
We're going to run out of time here post haste. I did ask you a bit ago about any hopes and dreams you have. Have you got any that we didn't cover that you want us to be aware of and look forward to?
Well, being relatively new to the position,
Yeah.
I started back.
Yeah, new kid on the block, so to speak.
I came on a week before we shut down for COVID.
Well, COVID's changed our lives, hasn't
Yes,
it?
I'm still, you could say, learning on the job and getting ideas as we go along.
But how many years have you been in library science?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think here for a minute.
You're
What
no
prompted,
novice, are
what
you?
prompted a young kid like you? Lord knows it couldn't have been the money, because as you look forward to your career as a young man in college, you certainly couldn't have had that high on your radar screen as a great source of income. So you must have been motivated somehow, because the position you filled at the college as a librarian is a very, very important job in our field of education. And a good library is an asset to any community, and we're certainly lucky here in Lincoln-Golden County.
Well, I've always enjoyed being around books. I've always enjoyed learning. I admit I read probably far more nonfiction than fiction, just because that's my interest. I
Sure,
like to learn things. I enjoy history. I enjoy subjects such as, also some science. And I enjoy helping other people to learn as well. And I think that libraries benefit society to a great degree.
Oh, no question about that.
Well, keep us abreast of your progress, and you suggested that you'd like to have a Logan County history program there. We'd sure like to be given a heads up on that so that we can discuss it with our listeners, because I'm sure people will want to take advantage of that. That's a brainful idea.
Oh, I will definitely do that.
Yeah.
Mike Starasta, our director of Lincoln Public Library, has been kind enough to give us his time this morning. Decided to forego a morning beer or coffee, whatever the case may be, Mike. Seriously, we thank you very much for sharing your skills and your time with us. And folks, respect what we have there in our library. We just have a magnificent, not only an architectural, physical presence there, but we have a great social service to our Lincoln Logan County in our libraries that we enjoy here in the county. So we'll close with the usual hopeful, be nice to somebody and make sure they smile today. Thank you, Mike Starasta.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you.